UN Mediation Startup Guidelines. When destructive conflict breaks out, the population is sucked in as perpetrators, victims, and bystanders. The UN was created to resolve such conflicts using approaches such as dialogue and mediation. You know as well as I do that the UN continuously looks for ways to improve its efficiency. Thanks to this drive for improvement, we are more proactive and professional than ever before. The UN Department of Political Affairs has established a mediation support unit. The Mediation Startup Guidelines are a product of this unit. The guidelines provide a consistent, systematic approach to establishing effective mediation support in the UN system. Consistency is balanced with creativity because every conflict situation is unique and needs unique strategies. These guidelines are designed as a framework, as well as a spectrum of questions. Sometimes mediation is simply about asking the right questions. You'll find the answer in the field. It's about conforming to the spirit of the suggested approaches instead of following instructions to the letter. So let's start. The startup process for mediation is made up of 4 activities: strategic planning, operational planning, establishment of coordination and communication systems, and thinking beyond the startup phase. We might not follow these steps in strict order. In most cases, they will occur simultaneously or even retroactively. First question: is mediation the right tool for the problem, and more importantly, wanted by all parties in the conflict? External actors can only help if those most directly involved are willing to accept that help. Strategic planning. So let's say there is a conflict and we, the UN, are asked for assistance. The first thing we do is assemble an interim task team to look at the situation from every angle. The guidelines contain many of the questions that we have to ask before we take the decisions of whether, how, and with whom to engage. Once we make a recommendation to the Secretary General through the Under-Secretary General for Political Affairs, these decisions should be based on a sound conflict analysis that should be ongoing through the entire process. We could be directly or indirectly involved. Direct involvement might be for the UN to deploy a mediation team, or to initiate joint mediation operations with other organizations, or for the UN to send an envoy. The typical indirect involvement is for the UN to offer technical and diplomatic support for processes led by other organizations. We can also deploy peace and development advisors, mediation advisors, or mediation standby team members. Whatever engagement is decided on, it has to be approved at the highest levels. The guidelines take into consideration both scenarios and provide advice on how to act when the UN is the lead mediator, as well as how to support mediation when the process is led by another actor. But let's say that we're playing a direct role. On the ground, the situation is escalating. Our lead mediator runs a process to develop a mediation strategy, which is then assessed, endorsed at the highest level, and communicated appropriately to the different levels in the UN. The more coherent the strategy is, the more effectively it can be communicated. And you know that quick responses are, well, a question of life and death, possibly for thousands of people. Operational planning for mediation processes. A strategy can be nothing more than a great idea if not well implemented. This is the time when those clear goals must be translated into activities and tasks and assigned to specific people with the correct expertise. Technical and logistical requirements must be added into the strategy, and all of this must fit into a timeline. What are the staffing requirements and functions in a mediation team? What skills and specializations? And numbers? The guidelines provide a framework for the appointment of personnel. It's important to know what resources are available. Make sure that financial and administrative people are in crucial meetings so that they are up to speed with the resource needs of the project right from the start. They will be able to provide on-point information about what's available for use by the different departments. For the strategy to really work, it should be developed in close consultation with all the people who will be carrying it out, individuals and groups. Communication is going to be crucial in holding it all together. How does that team develop a communication strategy? Establishment of coordination and communication systems. This is the actual engineering of a communications framework, so we keep up to date with all the different functions, individuals, groups, and officials involved. How do we interact with the media? What are the communication tools for mediation? The guidelines explain reporting, information security, systems and technologies, and who the recipients of reports are. Information is exchanged, strategies are developed, progress is monitored, lessons are learned, and all of these mini processes are documented in a systematic way. This happens at team, country, regional, and international levels. Thinking beyond the conflict, the way forward. This is the final process. The implementation of mandates has begun, and the conflict is hopefully calming down. And who knows what will happen? This chapter of this particular history will continue. Our engagement always hinges on outward action and looking inward. As a rule, the UN continuously reflects on and documents the lessons learned and best practices. We talk, write, and share our experiences with our colleagues, so our institutional memory constantly gets refreshed with new input. It helps that we're speaking the same language. The Startup Guidelines create a framework for how we articulate our action and reflection about mediation. As the preamble of the Charter of the UN said, we have a responsibility to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. With the Mediation Startup Guidelines as a map, we can launch operations on the basis of a sound assessment of the situation, clear objectives, a defined strategy, tailored support systems, and solid coordination with partners. Because that's why we're doing it, isn't it? To build a lasting peace in a troubled world.